Well, basically, we have the idea of this film in '92, just after Days of Being Wild, and because of Days of Being Wild, and it's very hard for us to find people who want to produce this film. So we decided to produce this film by ourselves. So actually, this is the first film produced by Jetto, and the reason I want to make this film is I've been like a long following. I'm a fan of all martial arts novels, traditions, and at that point, Choi Hak just make his martial art film. It's very successful in Asia, so that means we see the opportunity to make a martial art film by ourselves. So we plan this projects, and at that point we decided to make this film in China because in those days Chinese Hong Kong co-production is not that popular. So basically we are the early film who made in China on locations. So it's more like adventure. It's very exciting project. When you look at all the genre, like the martial art film produced in the 60s by the Shaw brothers, they all shot in studios. And to me, the landscape is a very important part for this genre. It's not just a background. Basically, we want to see it on location, so we decide to do that. The motif of the film is based on a calendar, almanac, in the Chinese almanac. The thing is, we try to capture the seasons changes in this film. So the production is much longer than the normal production at that point for Hong Kong film standard, because normally in those days the shooting schedule is like 2 weeks or 2 months or 3 months. But this film lasts for like more than a year. No, we just asked for the deserts, and we went to the western part of China, which is very near, which is close to Mongolia and also to the Great Wall. And that's the part which is the hardest, and which looks to me is close to what this stories needs. Because deserts, we need something which is like an eternal, because the deserts will look the same then and now, and because we don't have a lot of budget to create the build set, so we basically create our set in a cave. Actually, this book is the most famous martial art novels. It was written in the 40s and become like a classic. And so I'm a big fan of Jin Yong and also another younger writers, Gu Long. So I want to combine the two of my favorite martial art novel writers in one film. The eagle shooting hero is like Lord of the Rings to Chinese, you know. And this novel has been like adapted for films for so many times. There's TV versions, there are feature film versions, and so I think it will be more challenging to do something which is different from the other version. I'm always curious about like how these two characters, the Ou Yangfeng and Wang Yaoshi, because in the novel they are already like 60s and established. They are very strong characters. I just want to know what will make these two persons become like this. I want to know the younger days. So I decided to create the younger days for these two characters. Now, Sammo, I think it's came from the long traditions, and I think he's an icon in this martial arts genre, because he started as from Beijing Opera, like a kid, and then he worked in cinema, with great directors like Choi Hak, John Woo, King Hu, or even earlier with Bruce Lee. And I always want to work with him, so that's why I said, well, I need Sammo Hung to be the choreographer for this film. Basically, we shot with 2 units, so I leave a lot of space for Sammo. I explained to him the idea of that scenes because normally for an action scene they go for like actions and how exciting it can be. But I want to put a theme because it's related to the stories. So I would tell them like for the character of Tony Leung, because he's going to be blind, and I want to shot in long sequence, high speed, because I want to show the heaviness of the swords when he becomes very tired. And for like Jackie Chan, I said this one is fresh from the countryside. I want him to be fast. I want to see the speed. And the actual executions, I just leave it to Sam. We shot a part of it in Hong Kong in the studio. It's basically the place where Maggie lives, and the rest basically is on locations. It basically you have to understand at that point we are basically trapped in the deserts, and we have to work with like all these existing resources and the environment, and sometimes we have to shot under lights. So it's when a film is not like you didn't get the right exposures that you want because you don't have enough light, then it will become grainy. So in a way, part of the film we're trying to make it like this technical issue become like the style of this film, to make it look grainy and to go for that, because I think, well, it fits the texture of the desert. In terms of the characters, just like I said, for Tony Leung, I want to shot that scene in slow motion because I want to show the heaviness. Because sometimes people like to use slow motion for romantic reasons, to make it light and to make it like romantic. But I think for me, it's like it's about the heaviness, because when you become very tired, you have to slow down. I don't think this is like we consciously do that, but during this process of doing this redux, you realize like a lot of themes was already there. So it is like a kind of a basis of our work after that. I would say that it is quite different, because I think most of the martial art films ends with a big fight, and it's the standards or the criteria is how exciting it will be. Everything was determined by forces, but in this film we're just trying to say it is not determined by that. Actually, it's determined by time. Because you know the original novel is like a trilogy, and actually it is a big, a massive like a novel, an epic. So I trying to keep as much essence of this novel as much as possible. So in a way, it is a very complex story, and I have to adopt. The first thing to know is like we have to decide the structures, and I think the best structure for this film is an almanac. It's like a calendar, and the film is different from my previous work. Is in or afterwards is most of the story I create myself. It's we have a beginning and we explore. We don't know how the film will end. at the end. But for Ashes of Time, because there's already a novel there, we know how the story should end. So in a way, we have to imagine backwards. Also, it's kind of a fatalistic because we know the fate will go into these directions. I think that basically this story is about like what can you achieve? Because I think the line of Leslie at the end is basically the theme of the film. It's like um, we have so many mistakes. I don't think it's a delay emotions. They know it when they part. It is intentional, but because they are young, they want to do it this way. And at the end, the story is really about like how can you just uh, um, redeem yourself afterwards? Because when everything is gone, what can you do? The only thing is not to forget. Like, the first medium that I get in touch with this genre, the martial art novels, is through radio. It's not from print. Because in those days, it is very popular to have radio programs. So this is also the intentions. I want to create this film just like a radio program. It is like it can be heard. It's not only to be seen. You can basically just play this film without watching the image. You can still understand the film. And also because for we have one narrator, the major narrators. It's like the story from this guy. So this is normally the way they do this radio program. The reason I asked Patrick to work on this, the editing of this film is because I was shooting Chungking Express at the same time of Ashes of Time. So I said, well, because I admire Patrick and he's a very disciplined editor. The way he cut his own film is very precise. He's very harsh and very detailed. So I invite him to do the editing for this film. And I said, well, Patrick, don't worry about me because he wanted to know my intention. I said, well, this is my intention. I want you to be as harsh on the material as possible because if they are no good, they won't survive. So he spent like months on the editing. And at the end, because we are in a rush to present the film in Venice, so I have to ask William to work on the rest of the reel. And this is the first time that actually William started cutting the film. We finished the shooting in China, so we go back to Hong Kong, we start cutting the film, and the producer wanted to present the film in Venice, which means we have like 5 months work on the post-productions. So I think, well, instead of doing like the post on this film, because the equipment was there and we want to shot the film fairly quickly, and we decided to shoot on Chungking Express. It was in 1999 we realized we just got a phone call from the lab in Hong Kong which stored the negative of this film. They are going to wind up overnight. So we have to retrieve all the material in one day, and we realized they put it in a warehouse which is very damp. So most of the negative actually is damped and in pieces. So we decided to do kind of a restorations. And the material is so bad we have to retrieve some of the materials from France because France has released the film, they have material, and through Chinatown. And it took us a few years to do that. And finally, when we put this film together, I realized it is not only a simple restoration. And there's so many things that in 1992, which are giving our resources and our financial budgets concerns, we are not able to make it right. So I think, well, maybe this is a time, since we are going to do these restorations, I want to make it like right this time. I invite Yo-Yo Ma and some of the musicians in China to create to help me to create part of the music of this film, because I think the music we create at that time by Frankie Chen, which is great, and somehow some of this feel like dated now, and so we have to create a theme for this music, for this film, and s- and I've been warned by a lot of people, especially audience in China, because they told us they watched this film in '94 mostly on private DVD, pirate DVD, and in small like hall. There's no official screening at that time, and they watched the film so many times because at that point for them this is a kind of a new martial art film, and they want us to be careful about these restorations. Don't mess it up. Don't create so many things that makes the film very different to the original. And and my intention to make this redux is not to do something that ignore our original versions. I don't want to Photoshop the past. I just want to create what it's supposed to be. So the music actually is a crossover between Frankie Chen, the original music, and the new tracks created by Yo-Yo Ma and his team. The thing is, it's mainly not the creative choices. It's basically because of technical reasons. It's the film, the Redux is shorter than the original versions because a lot of material, some of the material is so bad that it's impossible to restore, and it's impossible to remake because like Leslie is he passed away a few years ago, and so we have to give up this moments. And because of that, we have to restructure the film in a way and into like chapters, which make it coherent and consistent with the original version. Because we make this film, or two films, almost at the same time, it's basically a lot of the crew is the same. And even some of the cast is the same, like Bridget, like Tony,